of America is now seen as a country which is a pivot to its Indo-Pacific strategy. It is seen as a counterweight to China. It is the largest recipient of military hardware from the United States of America and the Western countries. It desires to establish a blue navy in the Indo-Pacific region. And it is part of the Quad, the Asian Quad, the Middle Eastern Quad. And also, the situation has further aggravated for almost every regional country after the signing of logistic and intelligence agreements between the United States of America and India. And I am referring to the signing of BACA, LEMWA, CAMCASA, etc. The more worrying phenomena for all of us, all the South Asian countries, is the recent trend. And this trend is being witnessed for at least the last 5 or 6 years, when the US has begun to coordinate its policies in respect of all South Asian countries with India. In other words, whenever there is any US initiative in respect of any of the South Asian countries, it has to first seek an endorsement from the Indian side. In other words, India has also acquiesced to Indian sensitivities as far as South Asian region is concerned, and it remains unwilling to take any initiative which is kind of vetoed by the Indian side. So in other words, India has begun to exercise a veto over the US Western policies as far as other South Asian countries are concerned. Ladies and gentlemen, in order to discuss these important issues, we have a splendid panel today. Our first panelist will be Dr. Yelena Biberman. She is a professor of political science at Skidmore College, New York, non-resident fellow at the Atlantic Council South Asia Center, and associate at Harvard University's Davis Center. She will be speaking on the increasing great power competition. I would invite Dr. Yelena Biberman for her remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I want to say first that it is an honor to be among such esteemed practitioners and experts, and I want to thank the organizers for including me in this panel, and specific shout out to Fraz Naqvi for the organizing of my participation. So I'm going to structure my brief talk as sort of bird's eye view vision of the great power competition with several questions that I will try to address briefly. So the first question I'm going to dive into is, what is this nature of the competition? What is this great power competition like structurally? And so one big question that comes up in connection to that is this a new Cold War that we're witnessing emerging globally and in Asia? So some argue that no, this cannot be another Cold War. There's no ideological battle happening between great powers, and also China and the United States, and also China and India have strong economic ties that's going to prevent from that kind of competition. But there are also those who say, yes, actually, when you look into the analogy, the Cold War analogy, it works really well. Among those people is Yun Fong Kong, who's famous for his book, Analogies at War, and he does see a parallel there, the big picture parallel between the two. So there are also those like Graham Allison at Harvard, who is famous for his book, Destined for War, who argues that China-US rivalry is inevitable. It's a competition between a rising and a ruling power. So again, opinions are divided if this is going to be a Cold War type of struggle. But, with the role of nuclear weapons and other role of emerging technologies, it's likely to kind of have a big impact on how this plays out. Within the United States itself, I want to add that there's differing views about, what the U.S. should do and how U.S. should treat this competition with China, right? So there's a realization, I think, broadly that this liberal world order that U.S. has created since World War II has neither been liberal nor orderly, right? Still, there's differing views. I'm going to list some of them. The first one I would identify is called the Vanderbilt Coalition. These are individuals who argue for big stick foreign policy using military. This is an advantage that U.S. still holds. American leadership, free and fair trade. So for the United States to pursue its foreign policy using sort of the military and its military strength and leadership. There is an alternative that is emerging, becoming strong, coming from the Quincy Institute in Washington, and a number of very prominent experts are out there advocating for U.S. to be militarily restrained, to lead with diplomacy, promote peace, leading by example, coexisting with its rivals. So that one is gaining steam in Washington and broadly. There is another approach coming from the far left called the Fellow Travelers Organization, which is really about reducing harms by the United States to the world. So kind of looking at what the US has done historically and seeing that instead of creating a safer world, it has led to a more chaotic, dangerous world. And so sort of looking into and being critical of US foreign policy and democratizing the benefits of foreign policy to ordinary people. Another approach, which is very popular, is called the Free World Strategy. And that one is led by Thomas Wright from the Brookings Institution. And he sort of sees global competition as a competition between democracies and authoritarian, or what he calls neo-authoritarian countries, specifically China and Russia. It's interesting, US is still careful not to see India as a potential rising authoritarian state, but there's some, some emerging criticism of India's domestic politics there. So the focus here is on threat to liberties. There is a recognition that U.S. might have to cooperate with authoritarian countries on areas of mutual interest, but still sort of tries to kind of envision the competition as being between democracies and authoritarian countries. And finally, there's what we call the Biden Doctrine, which is what President Biden is trying to carry out. Characterized by what he calls strategic competition. We United States having ideological and material competition with autocracies like China and Russia, but also sort of leading by example, focusing on these sort of existential important global issues like climate change, and also looking inward and strengthening its own political democratic institutions, right? That's part of the leading by examples. So there's obviously problems potentially and criticism of each of the different approaches. There's some overlaps in terms of sort of this, which is very, very popular now. You see it in the media a lot, this idea that, democracies need to stand up to authoritarian countries. Of course, US has its own history of supporting authoritarian countries. And materially, US is the world's leading arms trading nation who has provided arms to over half of the world. And many of the countries receiving arms from US are authoritarian countries. So that contradicts this notion. And in terms of US leadership, we're also seeing that being challenged empirically, globally, right? So it's been noted by expert Monica Tough that between 2013 and 18, the number of non-Americans who considered US a threat nearly doubled from 25% to 45% globally. So this is something US needs to pay attention to within this great power competition that it's trying to orient itself to, still figuring out. But within this competition, US and India do share some goals, and one big one is containing China. China seems to exhibit sort of this approach of national rejuvenation, having tributary relations with other countries, allowing them for some political sovereignty, but still having a say ideally over their foreign policy in the long run. we see the younger Chinese officials actually being more hawkish, more nationalist in their approach. So there seems to be sort of this nationalist sentiment within the Chinese government is likely to persist for several decades at least. And so within sort of, again, this US challenging China, what it's called, its Indo-Pacific strategy, looking for, quote, free and open Indo-Pacific. US does see the region, which includes South Asia, I think, vital to its security and prosperity, according to Biden's doctrine and strategy. Doesn't want the region to be dominated by any single power, which specifically China, of course. And a quick note about the China-India competition. Of course, we know about the border disputes, which have been common and at least once very violent, and also influence in smaller countries. So China is stepping into South Asia in countries like Nepal through the BRI projects. It has sold submarines to India's neighbors of Bangladesh, Myanmar, and Pakistan, and expanded its naval presence in the Indian Ocean. So it's, China is stepping into the region more actively over time, competing with India and South Asia to provide infrastructure, financial aid, vaccines. And at the same time, though, we need to keep in mind that India and China do have economic dependency, where India has a big trade deficit with China and very dependent on Chinese imports, which could curb kind of this competition a little bit. Okay, my second question that I want to think about is whether this competition, great power competition, could turn violent, as it did during the Cold War. If the Cold War analogy holds, could we see some sort of internal instability in South Asia as a result of this competition? So again, experts are divided. There are some who say yes. This actually, this competition will be even more violent than the one during the Cold War. Among those experts is John Mearsheimer at Chicago University. He says that the reason for it is because China is just way more powerful than Soviet Union ever was. Its population is much greater, it's much wealthier as a country. So in terms of capabilities, China has the capability to really challenge US in the way Soviet Union couldn't directly. So, and in terms of intentions, Mearsheimer also points to nationalism in China, at what he calls the world's most powerful ideology. It's not really communism, but nationalism that is driving sort of Chinese intentions. And there's sort of this emphasis on sort of China's century of national humiliation, overcoming that, challenging that sort of he sees as a red flag. And he sees that there's a potential for really big confrontation. And of course, countries like Pakistan will have to figure out how to navigate that. The good news is there are experts who are also arguing that there actually will be less violence with this great power competition. And from the same university, Chicago, Paul Stanulin says, well, when you look now, these countries, smaller countries like Pakistan, they're more developed, they're more capable, they know how to protect their sovereignty, so they're not going to allow themselves to be played in the way that countries were played during the Cold War. So that's a more optimistic vision there. Another question I want to briefly talk about is sort of US versus Chinese strategy towards Pakistan, sort of playing out empirically. So what China has accomplished in Pakistan in terms of over the past 8 years has been remarkable. US could only dream of having sort of the esteem of the country and just in terms of its material interests. So it drastically furthered its material interests with the China-Pakistan economic corridor while reducing terrorism threats from AFPAC-based groups. So US could only dream. And when I did the analysis with some of my partners, what I found that Chinese strategy towards Pakistan has been the exact opposite than that of the United States. And I broke it into so militarily, it has pursued a more of an invisible role. So military invisibility, sculpting from a distance in Pakistan, using the Pakistani military, paramilitary, police forces to do its counterinsurgency operations. Economically, though, it has been very visible, unlike the United States, has become it is now Pakistan's largest foreign direct investor, and also has heavily invested in Pakistan energy sector, which allowed even ordinary people to see the benefits of Chinese investment. Unlike US, it has practiced indiscriminate diplomacy. It has tried to negotiate with armed non-state groups inside Pakistan, and also pursuing policy that is aligned geopolitically with Pakistani interests as well. For example, with Iran, relationship with Iran. So US has done quite the opposite. So that's been really interesting to see. But at the same time, there seems to be some inertia in terms of what is possible. And so China seems to kind of have grown really weary of the conditions in Pakistan, and is currently, from my sources, seems to be unsatisfied with the security arrangements. At least 20 terrorist attacks of the past 4 years were against Chinese interests in the region, specifically in Balochistan. So China is trying to think more creatively about security alternatives in the region, and is entertaining the idea of recruiting and training its own security force inside Pakistan, which seems like Pakistan is not interested in very much, but sort of kind of leaning into now what the US has been doing. So, of course, Pakistan is also worried about China is also worried about Pakistani economy, political changes, and even the relationship with India. There's a sense like, okay, even though China and India are competitors, China and India do have those economic interests in common that I did mention. And finally, of course, security threats from the Baloch nationalist separatists, Sindhi nationalist separatists, and Islamist terrorist organizations that kind of have made it really difficult for Chinese to operate in Pakistan. And finally, very last question is, what can countries like Pakistan that are caught in the middle of the great power competition, what can they do? Yaqub Hassan from Central University of Kashmir has written a great article about hedging. And this is really what Pakistan has been doing for a while now, which is sort of playing both sides. And this is for countries who operate in conditions of high uncertainty. We don't know, how the system is going to progress. There are high stakes involved, so you avoid taking sides. You sometimes have to pursue opposite measures vis-a-vis China, India, Pakistan, China, India, US, to have some sort of fallback position. So this is something that could potentially be developed instead of kind of acting ad hoc and kind of playing the game. This could really develop into a concrete strategy and explicit strategy. It's a behavior that's located, as experts say, between bandwagoning and balancing. And so I think there's just a need sort of to be more explicit and open about this is what we're doing. And because this is something that most countries have been doing, you can see that after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, so many countries refuse to take a side, right?
Thank you, Dr. Yelena. I would like you to wind up.
Thank you. So I will end there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Since we have to wind up this session by 6:30 positively, we would request to all our panelists to confine their remarks to a maximum of 12 minutes, so that we are able to give a chance to the audience to ask some questions from the panelists as well. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, our next distinguished speaker is Dr. Rabia Akhtar. Dr. Rabia Akhtar is Director, Center for Security, Strategy and Policy Research, University of Lahore. And she will be speaking on challenges and future of strategic stability in the region. Floor is yours, Dr. Rabia.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Jalani. I'll definitely keep my comments very brief. I would like to begin by thanking Ambassador Nadeem Riaz, President IRS, for providing me an opportunity to speak at this conference. The topic is challenges and future of strategic stability in South Asia. So I could do two things. One, I could give you a very standard view of strategic stability in South Asia, whereby both India and Pakistan are trying to maintain a balance of power, devising means to deter the outbreak of war, and do not want uncontrolled escalation of conflict, both symmetric and asymmetric. And second, I could tell you that everything that I've said above is no longer the standard, and that India and Pakistan in South Asia are no longer the only agents responsible for their strategic stability, and that there are more actors out there who now have more influence over how the dynamics between this hostile duo would play out. Dr. Yelan, I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing your name right, Yelena, and Ambassador Jelani, spoke about, great power competition. I would like you to understand that it is an important external factor, much understudied, disrupting strategic stability in South Asia. So its strategic stability was a combination of arms race stability and deterrence stability. Then great power competition, specifically India-US strategic alliance, is upsetting both arms race and deterrence stability in South Asia by increasing the economic and military capabilities of India, which are a threat for Pakistan. In addition to that, increased intelligence sharing and military cooperation between India and the US is a direct threat for Pakistan, reinforcing its age-old security dilemma, pushing Pakistan to adopt means to maintain and increase its own security and stability. The impact of this alliance between US and India is a direct hit at destabilizing the already existing fragile strategic stability in the region. So it is for you to think whether it is by default or whether it is by design. Can we say that whatever steps that are being taken to check the aggressiveness of China in the Indo-Pacific don't have any effect on Indo-Pak duo, or that we should continue to believe that our duo is immune to external influences and that our strategic dynamics are independent of what's happening around us in the broader neighborhood? Sadly, we cannot say that anymore and can't be certain about that. I would like to draw a historical analogy here. In 1965, while India and Pakistan were using US-supplied weapons against each other, they both knew that they were clearly violating the terms of the agreement against which the US had supplied those weapons to the two countries in the first place. While we were blamed for violating the terms of the agreement, actually to this day, there is no one that points a finger at the US for supplying two hostile neighbors who had a proven track record of animosity post-partition, weapons that could be and would be used if needed against each other. It was a no-brainer, yet the weapons were supplied, and a naive expectation that the weapons won't be used against each other helped everybody sleep at night until it didn't. Similarly, today, when the US is helping to increase India's military capabilities through the sale of advanced military equipment and technology to help India modernize its military and improve its capabilities, through joint military exercises and training to help improve cooperation and interoperability between the two countries' armed forces, by providing them training and educational opportunities for Indian military personnel to help improve the skills and capabilities of the Indian military, by providing India with logistics support to improve India's ability to project military power in the region, and by providing India with access to US military bases and infrastructure, in addition to providing India with intelligence and surveillance capabilities, which can help India monitor and protect its borders and interests in the region. Why do you think does the US want you to believe that it is only building India's capabilities vis-a-vis China? And that none of it would alter the strategic stability in South Asia, because that's not what it is directed against in its books. I believe perhaps it is time for us to rethink strategic stability in South Asia as only determined by what India does to Pakistan or what Pakistan does to India. There is a much broader play here, which is not part of our discourse on security and threat perception, which directly affects what we consider stability in the region. Now, while the world has you convinced that the only threats to strategic stability in South Asia emanate from proliferation of nuclear weapons, the Kashmir dispute, terrorism, and conventional military imbalance between India and Pakistan, there is absolutely zero conversation that we in Pakistan are doing about the role US is playing in helping India grow military capabilities and the acquisition of advanced weapon systems, tipping the balance of power in the region in India's favor. So let's change this conversation and add new variables to the mix so that we understand what are the threats to strategic stability in South Asia if we have any chance at countering them and making our region more stable. These are the second order effects which are not unintended or indirect in this case. And I believe that we as academic community of experts and scholars and think tankers need to do more research on it. Now, in addition to the points that I have made about great power competition and second order effects for Pakistan, I will close by saying that the future is already here. we have our hands full with emerging technologies, having the potential to threaten strategic stability in South Asia in several ways. Number one is cyber warfare, too much in the face. Cyber warfare and cyber espionage by state and as well as non-state actors in the region has the potential to disrupt critical infrastructure. Cyber attacks on command and control systems as well is also at risk for breaking out an accidental nuclear war. Secondly, it's artificial intelligence and autonomous systems, AI-enabled systems that could increase the speed and complexity of decision-making in a crisis, which will make it very much harder to de-escalate conflicts and maintain strategic stability. So I believe that we need to think about using emerging technologies for making it easier to de-escalate conflicts. Let's do some work on it, because until now, every seminar, every conference talks about the disruptive effects of these technologies. Can we do some out-of-the-box thinking and talk about, or think and do research about how can we use these technologies to de-escalate the next conflict or crisis between India and Pakistan? Then we have the introduction of hypersonic weapons in our region, which are difficult to detect and intercept because they travel at the speeds of up to 5 times the speed of sound. The militarization of space is another area which has led to new forms of conflict and competition between states in the region. And if lastly, that's not an exhaustive list, but I would end here. If COVID has taught us anything as a collective whole, it's the potential use of biotechnology, which includes genetic engineering and bioweapons that could be a new level of threat, not only to South Asia, to our region, but to the world at large. So overall, this rapid pace of technological change is very much likely to introduce new challenges, and it requires new and fresh thinking, new approaches to arms control, to crisis management, to deterrent stability that we need to think about and move away from the traditional set of challenges to strategic stability that we have been researching on for years. I would like to end here and thank you once again for giving me the opportunity to speak. I look forward to the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rabia Akhtar. You have made some very, very pertinent point that strategic stability in South Asia is not only the responsibility of Pakistan and India, but also the external powers which help embolden the capacity of the other. Thank you so much for your remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker is Vice Admiral retired Ahmed Saeed. The Admiral joined Pakistan Navy in 1981 and was subsequently granted commission in Operations Branch in 1985. I'm not going to go through the entire bio of the speaker. You can see it on the screen. He will be speaking on the quest for maritime domination, which is emerging yet another concern for not only the South Asian countries, but also many other countries in the Asia-Pacific region. Thank you. The floor is yours, sir.
So, you allow, I'm
Sure.
speaking from the dais.
Sure.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. President IRS, Ambassador Riaz, Ambassador Jilani, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. Like you all are in very comfortable water, I was also sailing in a comfortable water about 30 minutes ago when I was given a news that after 30 minutes I will have to speak on this topic. So quickly I jotted down certain things, and I'd like to go through these points one by one, but do forgive me if there is a little incoherence in my thoughts or maybe a little misplaced facts, which I'll try not to be. So the topic which has been given to me is the traditional security consensus in South Asia, that is the overall construct, and under that, the quest for maritime domination, definitely it is in the context of India, Indo-Pak's relation. So first thing which I would like to a little clarify to my understanding is the topic word domination. Because domination in terms of land or maybe in the air and other areas, it has a different connotation. But when it is talked about in the maritime sector, the domination comes with some paraphernalia and certain regulations and certain rules, which is close to sea control. So sea control is a very tight conditions whereby in time and space, you create certain conditions where things will happen according to your will and wish. So this is a very tough ask for any maritime force, I would say. Even those who are well versed with the history, in the Falkland War, even UK with its total might could not claim this world that it had totally dominated the that area. So that was only in time and space. There was a little time where they could do the landing, and that was the area where they did have this liberty. So once we talk about this in context of Indian Ocean or in relation with India and Pakistan, so this has a different connotation. That's what I wanted to explain first. So coming to the traditional security, as we had already seen in the first session, that there were traditional and non-traditional security. So traditional is something, all those security measures or things which are directly undertaken by the state. So that means that is a defense related, which I'll be talking about more. A little glean through the history, that will be good to understand where do we stand today. That after the creation of Pakistan, the asset division as it was perceived, it was unjustifiedly done by the other party. So was the same in case of Pakistan Navy and the maritime sector. In that also we had a very meager resources to start with. But taking into consideration our security dictates, we joined the SEATO and CENTOS, and in the same area, all the hardwares and the policies which we had, those were linked with the West. So that's how we took a start. That was a convenient sailing, and one of the big decision which was taken by the nation, it was in early 60s that we as a nation decided to acquire and operate submarines. So that was the first country to be who had taken this decision in this context. So in 1964, we acquired USS Diablo from USA, and that was later on commissioned in Pakistan Navy as Ghazi submarines. And why I'm coming to this one decision, because it has a lot of implication later on during our conflicts which we had with the India and Pakistan. Starting from 1965 war, only one submarine had so much of terror in the sea that the entire fleet of India remained confined to their coasts. Even the later part, the aircraft carrier, they had to send it to the far end of the Andaman Islands just to escape from the submarine. So in 65 war, the Operation Dwarka, which was conducted by our surface ships, we bombarded their coast. That was merely because a submarine was there. Subsequently, in 1971 war, by then we had also acquired 3 more Daphne class submarines from the France. So the Hangor class the Hangor submarine under the command of, you must be knowing it. Then he was commander, now the retired Vice Admiral Ahmed Tasneem. So they sank Indian warship, Kukri, and damaged the other one. And that was the first incident after the Second World War. It is the first incident in recorded history. Although we had unfortunate part that the other part of Pakistan got separated in, but these are certain things which as a nation we must understand. So then we kept going on, and we in the Cold War era, again, we were allied towards the US. In the post-Cold War era, initially, we stuck to the Western countries. But slowly and gradually, as we had seen that about 2012, when US started shifting its policies from Asia Pacific to Indo-Pacific. This was done by Obama's administration, and with purpose to shift their policy from containment of China to contestation of China. They started to take the measures to contest China aggressively now. And within that, a lot of agreements that took place in we know that about COMCASA hai, LEMWA, IU2, U2, and AUKUS, which is very important, and Quad. Under this arrangement, India has been given and lifted up as a net security provider. This is a terminology which is being used very widely, and India is being equipped accordingly. Of course, it has implications for Pakistan's security as well. Why? Because the previous speaker also alluded to that India has been given now certain status in terms of special information intelligence being given to the India to augment its status. So that is where the Pakistan has a security concern. Second is that with that, India has started increasing its footprint in the Indian Ocean. In IOR, it has made stations in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is less, it's Maldives, Djibouti, eastern coast of Africa also, Seychelles also, and plus Oman. So they are trying to assert in this area. So why this contestation is taking place in our region? Definitely the geography of this area gives you the ample example and the proofs that about 70% of world trade is passing through this area. Again, the major oil routes are passing from this area. If we start from the Hormuz, Strait of Hormuz, then it is Bab el-Mandab, then it is Suez Canal. Coming down is the Mozambique Channel, then is the Cape of Good Hope. Going towards the east is the Strait of Malacca, Sunda State. So these are actually the choke points which are controlling. So the countries, those who will control these choke points and have an influence in that, definitely they will have the edge on it. So there is what the India is looking at the moment. And it is propelling itself to that status. Not only with this, but they are coming up big way in terms of developing its hardware, which is about 230 to 250 major ships by 2030, which will include 3 aircraft carriers, 5 SSBNs, and around 25 small submarines. So this is infrastructure which India is looking at. On our side, what should be our response? in that context, definitely in such a situation, we have to have political environment in such a way that we should be able to make alliances. Because this is thing which India has been doing, this is thing which we should also look forward to, and we make our choices accordingly. Of late, one of the Indian thinker, I just saw his YouTube on the channel. He was saying that Pakistan, as we have been propagating all along, that we have been able to isolate Pakistan. But the excise Aman, which is coming up in beginning of next month, about 50 countries, more than 50 countries are participating in that. And he said that this is a slap on the face of all those Indians who say that Pakistan has been isolated. So going into this direction, that means make alliances, make these kind of big exercises with the countries. That is where we should be looking into the maritime sector. But at the same time, the material deficiencies which are there, which is going rapidly into India's favor, that we have to also be looked into. So for that, definitely the pie has to be bigger, so that the defense forces, they are given that kind of due share, that they are able to multiply themselves as well. But in overall construct, when I say that Indo-Pacific, when I talk India and Pakistan, our overall strategy, we have always been under the overall nuclearization of this region, is defensive in nature. It is not aggressive in terms of going and attacking any other country. It is defensive in nature. And then within that, if we are challenged, we should be prepared to give a prudent response also. That means within that, we should have offensive element also. For that, we have about 1,000 kilometers coast with respect to India, which has about over 7,000 kilometers coastline. With this construct, I think we are not much behind in giving them the response also. So with this, I conclude my talk, that this contestation in Indo-Pacific or India-Pakistan relations will continue definitely, as long as big powers, they are shifting their fulcrum from from land towards the sea. And in the sea now, major competition will be seen, and that too in controlling the choke points, that is main area. And this also reinforces my statement when we see 2 days ago, when the Indian defense minister, he visited the Nicobar Islands, and he gave a statement that now India should also look towards from managing to enforcing at sea. They should be enforcing their policies at sea. So that means now there will be hotspots to be seen in these areas. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vice Admiral Ahmed Saeed, for your remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, our last and final speaker for this session is Lieutenant General Naeem Khalid Lodhi. General Lodhi needs no introduction. He is somebody who has established himself as a great scholar to discuss the strategic issues, internal as well as external, and would like to invite you, sir, for your remarks. Thank you. Sure.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you very much, IPS Ambassador Nadeem Saab and the chair. There's a good news that I'm the last speaker and you'll be free after this. And there's a bad news that still you have to listen to me. I've been asked to talk on Indo-Pak conventional power equation, which means conventional military balance and also conventional war fighting potential. And I think we all understand that numbers are important, volumes are important, but numbers alone do not decide the overall power potential of any force. So there are so many other factors. I'll be just touching them a bit, like the technology, how advanced the technology within a force, high tech, low tech, medium tech, and how the forces are connected with each other. How are they netted together, and whether they have the ability to operate in synchronization or not. We know that at times there have been problems. So as far as just comparison of the forces is concerned, I think it is very simple. You could have taken it from Google or from military balance. I was not required to say anything on that, but still I will give you the some of the figures. For example, the standing army. Various figures are quoted, but I think the authentic figure is somewhere 5.5 lakhs, about 500,000, a little more than 500,000, and Indian forces are about 1.2 million. But we also have to keep in mind that they have to look after two front scenarios, the China and Pakistan. Nowadays, we are also looking after two fronts, Afghanistan, and of course, whoever has done it, it's a very smart move. But the ratio is good enough, 1:1.2. As far as paramilitary forces are concerned, there's a big difference. We have about 5 lakhs and they have about 2.5 million, which means 5 times more. So their ability to control the internal disturbances is much bigger than our, that we must know. Of course, their reservists are about twice our, so they can gather more forces if mobilization is ordered. So that thing also, of course, have to be kept in mind. The only one factor which we keep on saying is that a major bulk of the standing army is, we say, Pakistan oriented. And that we say on the pretext that, and I think that is correct, that their heavy armor formations are not only oriented towards Pakistan, they can only be operated in the terrain which is, on the India-Pak border. They cannot be used much against the Chinese. There they have to use mountain divisions and all that. As far as the Air Force is concerned, of course, the number of aircraft is again not the criteria of the combat potential of the two sides. They have 2.5 times more aircraft, or even maybe 3 times. But I will not go into the detail that what are the high-tech components within that and all that. But I think we are fairly placed as far as the comparison is concerned. And the practical manifestation was given to us. The whole world saw it in that Operation Quick Retort. Even our Navy, although very small as compared to the Indian Navy, Vice Admiral just alluded to all that. We know that they have 2 aircraft carriers. We also know probably they have inducted nuclear-powered submarines. We also have submarines those which can deliver nuclear weapons, but we do not have nuclear-powered submarines. There's a big difference between the two. But Pakistan Navy, mashallah, showed the ability to detect Indian submarines twice, and that is a very big plus if we know that how submarines operate and how they can be detected. So I think that was a good thing. Yes, one area where they have an advantage and an area where we have an advantage, I must share with you. In air defense, they have that anti-ballistic missile systems, which is the S-400, whichever version, the Russian missile. That has actually given them an Iron Dome in some of the areas for a very long range, 400 to 600 probably kilometers, where they can detect and also shoot down incoming missiles and aircraft also coming from attack. But then we have Ababil, which is a MIRV, multiple had individually targeted re-entry vehicles, which can defeat this thing in a number of ways. And also we have the Babar cruise missile, which may not be easily detected. But the area in which we are good are the drones. it is very not much known to the general public that in the area of drones and especially the attack drones, we are much better off as compared to India. I mean, as we stand today. Nuclear forces, we are not supposed to talk today, but the only thing is because the conventional forces are integrated with the higher form of warfare, the nuclear war, and also the lower form of warfare, the LIC. So I will talk about LIC more. Just as far as the nuclear, thing is concerned, we all know that our threshold is ambiguous, which is a good thing to do. And they keep on asking us to sign a no first use treaty. And we have a very good answer telling them, okay, we will sign no aggression treaty, which I think more logical. Let us not aggress each other rather than saying that you will not use it and you will not do that. So we have not, nobody knows when and how Pakistani nuclear assets will be used and in which areas. And so I leave that thing there because I think not much should be spoken on that. Now, other important factors, first of all, is training. Now, training is somewhat subjective in certain areas, but also objective in other areas. And I'll tell you, I'll just take the objective part. Pakistan Army is known for field exercises, which we used to be carrying out very often, but for the last few years, I think we have slowed down on that because of other reasons, economic reasons, and also the this war fighting against terror. Most of the armies, although they say that is an economic way of doing it and a good way of doing it, they train themselves on simulators, which is good, and we also do it. But Pakistan Air Force, Pakistan Navy, Pakistan Army, they tend to go in the field along with everything. I mean, the formations go with they live outside. So they have that practice of living in the field, surviving in trenches and all that. That used to be a big plus. It is still there, but this war on terror has changed things a bit, and of course, this economic crunch is also naturally affecting all this. And let me talk about this economic crunch bit. We all know that everything runs on economy, and Pakistani leadership, both political and military, will have to review their military organizations, their strategy, keeping in view the shrinking, economy. Because if we do not change, then probably it will be very difficult to continue as the things are. I'm sure that those who are, concerned, those who have to take decisions, they must be thinking on it. In my opinion, we need to review our organizations. We need to review our strategy to make it more smart, to make it more economical. As far as leadership is concerned, even if because a lot of things have gone up against generals, so I'll not say that Pakistani generals are better than Indian generals, but let us assume that they are the same. But our junior leadership is definitely better than, and this is based on the war casualties and the small operation successes which Pakistan has been getting and what Indians have been getting, whatever recently we have seen. Our ratio of casualties of officers and the GCs is higher, which means that they lead from the front. And this is a big plus as far as, and I'm not talking about, Jazba-e-Shahadat and Jazba-e-Iman, because those are subjective things, so we'll not talk about that. Those are also multipliers whenever it comes to combat. So I think at junior leadership level, we are good. In warlike experience, of course, we are battle hardened but we must remember one thing, and I think military leadership also should know that as far as our war against terror is concerned, that was altogether a different characteristic war. And based on that, we should not have the airs that will be able to fight a regular, enemy in the same way. But let me also put it that in my own assessment, and I think assessment of many military thinkers, fighting an asymmetric war is much harder as compared to fighting a symmetric war. So if we can defeat an asymmetric enemy, which was having the backing of, our enemy intelligence agencies, it is very highly likely that we'll be doing well as far as symmetric war is concerned. National cohesion. Now, this is important. Armies not only fight on guns and tanks and all that, they also fight on morale, which they derive from the society. And unfortunately, the recent year has created a gulf between a certain portion of youth and also the armed forces. This needs to be bridged ASP, because this is one Achilles heel other than economy. If I have to, say to just list two factors, one is this economic, shrinkage, and other is this backing which we used to get from our people. Although I think in my reckoning, the people are not against army, they are only against the senior leadership. And also, I think that is also an exaggeration. Of course, it is in their thinking that they have lumped the entire senior leadership into one group. That has, of course, the leader matters a lot, but it's not necessary that all generals are like the general which we keep talking about. War stamina, of course, dependent on this economy also. Indians, they have a war stamina of 45 to 60 days. We have a war stamina of about 30 to 45 days, but that is good enough. I'm not going to, of course, talk about the strategy. Whatever is our strategic construct, this 30 to 40 days is a good enough thing for us. I'm just going to. Relationship with the other, policies. This is absolutely important. If your defense policy, your foreign policy, your economic policy, your internal policy, these four are not aligned, and we are looking into different directions and everybody is pursuing its own line of thinking, this creates a lot of weakness once it comes to fighting. So the diplomatic corps, which is always at the forefront, and we call it the vanguard of any conflict, they have to create those grounds where the forces can work and operate. And similarly, if there's an internal problem, after the forces clear the area, political leadership must take the ownership. This is what is lacking within our situation, that the armies, Air Force, with the help of Air Force and Navy, we clear a certain area, and then we are sitting there, nobody is taking over. And then after some time, they say, the same thing is coming back and this and that. And at times, army is blamed, and rightly so, that we make policies beyond our mandate. I think that is that we must refrain from. But then nobody tells us very clearly. For example, I'm sitting here, I would like to get from you, very, learned people sitting here, what is it that you want to do and army is not letting you to do? And what is it that you don't want to do and army is pushing you to do? Please, it must be brought out in the question answer session. So also there's an interface between, as I said, there's a conventional, warfare. There's a nuclear war, and there is low intensity conflict. Whenever there's a nuclear overhang, normally the war is pushed into the low intensity, area. So if you're not good there, there's always a possibility that you'll go to conventional war. So somehow or the other, under, I think, international pressure, we put all our, non-state actors into the jails because of various, pretexts that they have brought this to us and they have brought guns and they have brought this, whatever. I'm an army of, man. I can tell you very clearly that today the war is being prosecuted into low intensity conflict, in the economic zone, in the political zone. And if you're not good here, then definitely all the onus will come on the conventional forces, and then they will be also fighting under weakness. Because if you deprive me of operating non-state actors against an enemy who is doing that, by the way, what was Kulbhushan doing here, how the Chinese are being attacked, what is happening from the Afghan border, nobody speaks on that. But the moment one Maulvi goes out, you say, well, this should not be done and that should not be done. I mean, this we can cover on the question and answer session. So, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, just to conclude, I would say that we are better off even as a deterrent force. And inshallah, even if this deterrent fails temporarily, we'll be able to again, bring it back, inshallah. Of course, the areas which I've mentioned where we are weak, we need to do something about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, General Lodhi, for your excellent remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, now we are going to enter into a very interesting phase, and that's the question answer session. We have 15 minutes for this session, and I would request you to kindly be brief as far as your questions are concerned. So the first question goes to Mr. Banuri.
Towards a whole of the nation approach, given then that you have the new and emerging technologies and you have cyber warriors and you have civilian drone operators. How does this whole synergize into a strategy? Thank you very much.
Briefly,
Thank you very much. If I have to, just answer your question in one line, we are not doing enough as far as synergizing these things are concerned. Because unless we understand that, we keep talking a lot about hybrid war, and we all understand, everybody sitting here understand the importance of economy, importance of international politics and internal cohesion, and all that. But there is no one headquarters, I would say, where all these things are considered, and where all the experts of these things, they sit together, they synergize their efforts, and they make a plan that, okay, in economic field, we will do this. I'm talking about, once you talk about the undermining the economy of the, opponent and doing something good for your, as far as your own economy is concerned, of course, the economic people will keep on doing it. But we need to have a headquarters to defend ourselves against economic hitmen and to undermine the opponent's economy, for example. And similarly, to undermine at international fora, what to do with them and what they are doing to us. And then the military component. So military component being a smaller one is probably not accepting that they cannot be the ones who would be, on top of it. But for the time being, I would suggest that, okay, allow some general to be on the top, but put all the specialists under him so that they keep telling him what to do. For the time being, we have no other option, but we are not doing anything about it.
Thank you, sir. So you may.
Thank you. DG ISRA. Rabia Akhtar, if I'm
Your voice is cutting off.
The question is for Dr. Rabia and Dr. Yelena.
that the security paradigm in South Asia should not be seen in India-Pakistan context alone, but because of the other external factors. And I will take some liberty in saying the US and China rivalry. And I'll try to be very, very short in the question. By declaring India as a net security provider in South Asia, and given the historical baggage which exists between Pakistan and India, would you agree to my assertion that United States has basically become an agent of instability in the region and not an agent of stability in the region? So first is this assertion. And if this assertion is correct, if you agree to this analogy, so how should Pakistan then what should be our way forward? Because it's a superpower, which is becoming a source of instability in the region. Thank you.
Dr. Rabia,
Dr. Yelena, you can go first and then I'll answer.
Dr.
Okay.
Yelena, you may briefly respond to this.
Thank you for this very interesting question, sort of about the U.S. role. This is an argument that I've also made, emphasizing India's domestic politics and how they're not increasingly they're inconsistent with American values. So that in itself sort of should lead U.S. to sort of question its role in the region and the commitments. But yeah, the way the question is framed about sort of acting as an agent of instability by worsening the security dilemma for Pakistan, that is a good point. And what should Pakistan do? So one option, I mentioned hedging at the end, but I'd like to also mention this potentially sort of mobilizing with other countries with similar interests in hedging and kind of perhaps even leading a sort of a non-alignment movement with neighbors and even countries in Africa to counterbalance this sort of the way that the great powers are kind of joining each other and playing off of each other. So that's something to consider as part of the grand strategy. Lieutenant General Lodi mentioned, but I think sort of a lack of grand strategy on that Pakistan has, lack of synergy. And this is a problem that the United States has as well, but it would certainly help Pakistan in dealing with this, understanding what is this all for? What are Pakistan's interests in the region and for itself? And then finding like-minded countries to balance with at a global level.
Thank you. Your turn, Dr. Rabia Akhtar, to respond.
Yeah, just very briefly, I think Dr. Yelena has covered. So in my talk, I absolutely make this point that yes, US is an agent of instability in South Asia. And these second order effects, by prepping India against
We have lost you, Dr. Rabia Akhtar. We can go for the next question. Ji.
Thank you very much, sir. I am Bilal Abdul Nasir from National Institute of Maritime Affairs, and I have a question to Dr. Biberman, please. You remarked that we should be thankful to China for all the economic and the security assistance that it has provided in the CPEC and the military assistance you were talking. So don't you think that China should also be thankful to Pakistan for providing an outlet to the Western world? And after all, Pakistan was the first country to let the Chinese submarine get berth in port outside China, any foreign port outside China. And we have provided opportunity. Are you able to hear me? We have provided China the opportunity to participate in Aman exercise and also interact with the outside world. And the second thing is, if I may draw your attention, whether China could have been, it would have been possible for China to make these inroads without the help of Pakistan. Thank you.
Thank you for a question. I'll keep my answer brief, but I think you're right that Pakistan is very valuable for China. I think China recognizes it. It just simply finds it difficult at times to operate inside Pakistan. Pakistan could make a lot of trouble for China, right? Using non-state actors that Lieutenant General Lodi mentioned. It doesn't. So I think it has some cards to play. also, of course, Pakistan sort of turning a blind eye to the abuses in Xinjiang is something that, again, Pakistan has done for China as well. So, of course, it has this economic strategic value for China. And that is why experts predict that, China is not going anywhere. They might pull back a little bit, but, if they want to play a big role in the region, which they do, they need Pakistan.
Gentlemen, before we go to the next question, Dr. Rabia is would request her to complete her response to the question that was asked earlier. Dr. Rabia.
I hope you're able to hear me. The lights are out at my end, so my apologies for the
Yes,
video.
we can hear you. We can hear you.
Okay, just very briefly, so the conversation that we need to have with the US is to take some onus of responsibility on strategic stability in South Asia. We are bombarded with, research papers, conferences, seminars, Zoom webinars, where, Pakistan is painted as the problem in the region. And I'm about done hearing all of that. And I want to turn around and be able to say that United States being the superpower, has not been questioned since the beginning of our relationship, and as to how it has been a constant factor of instability in South Asia that has led to this point in time. So I think it's about time we take a historical view, a long overview of this, and bring, and talk about the elephant in the room. Thank you.
Thank you. We have room for one last question, and the last question goes to Ambassador Shah Jamal.
Yeah, I'm all only the question so far. Are sympathetic to the Pakistan position and understand the dilemma that we are facing. It is true, when the elephants fight, it is the ground. Discussions. I understand that the military leadership in United States want to contain China, and the timeline is 2027. Beyond that, they know that they cannot contain China beyond the second island chain. So if the war is coming and the situation gets tough, you have talked about all the things, but you have not talked about the decoupling and its impact that the American policy is being pursued, and other things which are related, denying advanced technical information. For example, lots of sanctions have been imposed. The Chinese firms, even TikTok has become a big talk in US at this point in time. UK has imposed sanctions on the companies. Where this is going to lead? If I listen to the American security advisor, he clearly espousing that we have to contain China, and within this timeline of 2020.
Dr. Irina, your turn to respond.
Oh, thank you. Would you mind repeating the question very briefly? I was unable to hear all of it.
Can you briefly repeat the question, the last
Sure.
part?
Yes, I still have trouble hearing, but I did catch a really important point I'd like to pick up on very briefly, which is about, if a war is coming, how, what should Pakistan do, and what, I think it's, futurizing is a growing field, at least in the United States. How can we predict what's happening? And there's certainly a big contingent of people who are foreseeing, kinetic clash, and again, with the use of emerging technologies, who know, we can only imagine what form that conflict will take and sort of, so I think, that is something that Pakistan should consider if there is a war. And that's why I mentioned non-alignment potentially to really solidify position. I know, historically non-alignment has been associated with India, but no longer does it need to be. And kind of really for Pakistan to be clear where it stands vis-a-vis the two powers would be a good idea. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. This has been an excellent session with great questions coming from the floor. There are some major takeaways from this session. First is that great power competition has a lot of bearing on the regional security and stability. Secondly, strategic stability is not the exclusive responsibility of Pakistan and India in this region. The external powers, the major powers too have responsibility for building the military capacities of the countries in this region, which has the potential to disturb the strategic balance. Number three, the rapid pace of technological advancement that also increases challenges for the regional countries, and there is an imperative need to have some kind of an understanding. They need to be brought in within a certain international parameters, rules and regulations. Thirdly, fourthly, increased Indian footprints in the Indian Ocean rim will exacerbate tension in the Asia-Pacific region. Next is, contrary to the propaganda being launched by certain quarters, Pakistan is not isolated. Participation of more than 50 countries in the next month's exercise Aman is a manifestation of the importance attached to Pakistan. Next is, contest between India and Pakistan will continue to take place not only on the land and air domain, but also in the at sea as well. Standing army, next, there is certainly an asymmetry between India and Pakistan as far as the defense capabilities are concerned. Bulk of the Indian army is Pakistan specific, and obviously they cannot be deployed against China because of the training that they have received over the years. Next is, India has advantages in air defense after the acquisition of S-400, and which Pakistan has the capability to neutralize through the Ababil missiles that we have, or the system that we have. Pakistan certainly has a strong advantage as far as drones and drones technology is concerned. Next is that both the political and the military leadership, they need to review their respective strategies, whether it is the economic strategy, whether it is the military strategy, or whether it's the political strategy. We need to have smart and economical defense capability that is the requirement of the day. General Lodi made a very interesting point that fighting an asymmetrical war is more difficult as compared to a symmetrical war. And lastly, national cohesion is of paramount importance. Alignment of objectives and policies is of paramount importance. With these takeaways, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you all for your patient hearing. I also thank the esteemed panelists, Dr. Yelena, Dr. Rabia Akhtar, Lieutenant General Naeem Khalid Lodi, and Vice Admiral Ahmed Saeed Saab. Thank you so much, and would request a loud round of applause for the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you so much to our participants, our audience, and our chairs who have joined us today and made it such a educational day for all of us. Inshallah, we hope to see you all here tomorrow when the conference continues at 9:30 a.m. And hope you have a pleasant rest of the evening. Khuda Hafiz.
Hello. 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 अभी हो कान पकड़ दो साइड पे पहले तो 10 सीरी के बेटे रखेंगे सर को Hello, how are you? Hello. Hello. 1, 2, 3. Hello. 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 हुमायूं ठीक है हेलो हुमायूं ठीक है वो बंद हुआ हेलो 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 ठीक है ना बस
Hello, mic check, 1, 2, 3, hello. Hello, mic, 1, 2, 3, hello. 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 Hello, mic check, 1, 2, 3, hello. 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 Hello.